Good morning, my friends. Today we shall dedicate a few words of Torah in English for a change. And today is a very important day. We are the 6th day of Chanukah, the 6th candle, and it's also Rosh Chodesh Tevet. You know, Tevet brings to mind Tov. Of course, it has different interpretation, but for us it means Tov. And by the way, you should know that even though the time of Chanukah is Kislev, according to Kabbalah, Kislev is a month of Din. But Tevet begins again the attenuation of the Din, and the month is better. Which means it's going to be better, Be'ezrat Hashem, for many reasons. So we shall say Dvar Torah, maybe that it will relate to Chanukah as well as to Parashat HaShavua. And the reason I would like to bring this subject, even though I related to it a few days ago, but because it is so important for the generation that people should absorb that message, that's the reason why I find it important to bring it to the mind of people, and this time in English. We find in the parasha of Vaigash, this week's parasha, that when Yosef HaTzadik, while being the king of Egypt, or as the Torah calls him, Mishneh, Lemelech Mitzrayim, the second in command, but our sages said that he was practically a melech. Zacha lemalchut, it says in the Gemara. Madua Yosef zacha lemalchut. See, that means Yosef was given the gift of royalty. But at that time, everybody knows the story about the brothers. They came to Egypt. They could not recognize him. But Yosef did recognize them. However, he did not reveal his identity for them for several reasons. Our sages explain that the reason he did not immediately tell them, I am Yosef, was because there was a certain degree of resentment, although the love that he had for them, but to a certain degree he had to limit it. He didn't want to show it, to exhibit it in such in profusion. He wanted to limit it because they deserve an atonement. So he wanted to, so to speak, to punish them for what they did to him. But the Mefarshim say that he was not interested in his own personal revenge. He was rather interested in the atonement of his brothers. And that's the reason, the Mefarshim explain, that's the reason why he put Shimon, he incarcerated Shimon in prison. In fact, there were 5 things that Yosef did against his brothers so that he can punish them middah keneged middah. One of the things, remember, when he put the money there in their bags, and then he put his own personal royal cup, and he practically made them become ganavim, thieves. That was a terrible moment for the brothers, because number one, they did not do that. He did it, but then when they brought it back, Yosef practically behaved with them as if they were thieves, that they stole the cup, the royal cup of the king. Why? Why did he do all this? Why Yosef was a vengeful person? Yosef is tzaddik. When we say Yosef a tzaddik, we mean that he is a perfect man. He does not harbor any resentment. He does not foment any kind of troubles against his brothers. But our sages understand that he had Leshem Shamayim. He wanted to save them midinah shel gehinnom. So that teaches us, by the way, that if a person does it, of course, l'shem shamayim, because if people do it because of their personal reasons, sometimes you punish someone, and then you tell him, the reason I punish you is because I don't want God to punish you. It's true, by the way. If somebody suffers because of you, it's a certain kapara for whatever he has done before. But one should not take this law in his hands, and to say the reason I am bad with you is because I don't want Hashem to punish you. Sometimes I say this jokingly, or maybe half jokingly, with my wife. So sometimes let's say if I behave a little harsh with her, so I say to her, so that God should forgive what you do also harshly against me. But that's not true, unless if one does it really l'shem shamayim. But the truth is that if one will do such a thing l'shem shamayim, he really has to be proclaimed a real tzaddik. If you are not a tzaddik, forget about l'shem shamayim. What l'shem shamayim? One goes according to his instinctive vendettas that he wants to carry on. Right? So one should not learn from this, that one should punish his friend so that, so to speak, he will be exonerated from the punishment of God. There's no such a thing. But Yosef, yes, we believe so. We refer to him as Yosef HaTzadik. So no question about it. There were 5 things, 5 punishments that he did against his own brothers. Middah keneged middah. For the reason why he hid the royal cup to portray them as ganavim is because they also did the same thing. When they sold him, they brought his kutonet and they dipped it in blood, and they came to their father and they says, ketonet bincha hi imlo. What kind of behavior is this? This is a lie, of course. At the same time, they stole the mind of Yaakov, of their father. So middah keneged middah, he behaved in such a way that they should feel for a while that they were pointed as ganavim, as thieves, and from the king himself. Imagine what was their terrible suffering at that time, when they did not even realize that he is Yosef. You know what is to be caught in such a thing? Nobody is going to believe you. Hashem Yishmor. In some cases like this, or similar cases, one practically, even though he is innocent, he can practically die out of shame, not knowing how to prove his case. There is the story that is brought in the Gemara in Masechet Berachot about a certain Talmid from the yeshiva. The poor guy went to the bathroom. At that time, the bathrooms they had their windows outside. So he left his tefillin out on the window while he is going to free himself. In the meantime, there was a prostitute that came outside, and she took the tefillin, the bag of tefillin. She took it. When he finished with his needs, he went to pick up his tefillin. He said, "Where is my tefillin?" He lost it. So what can he do? He goes to his yeshiva, and he lost his tefillin, has to procure himself with another tefillin. But he did not realize that this terrible prostitute, Imah V'zichra, she came to the yeshiva, and she went to the Rosh Yeshiva, and she said to him, Hakerna, the guy, he was with me, and he even gave me his tefillin, but he didn't pay me for my services. Oh my God, and the guy was innocent, he never once was with her. But Imach Shema, cruelly she did such a thing. Now the rumor, of course, spread all over the yeshiva, and even though they knew him and they could not believe that he would commit such an impurity upon himself, but nevertheless, what can you do to the mind? Once you have a suspicion of some kind, you're finished. You cannot get rid of a suspicion, no matter how much you believe in the guy. Once something goes into your mind, that's it. The boy understood that. He says, nobody is going to believe me. Even though they say, yes, we believe you, but it's not true. Because he cannot prove it. What can he prove? He went up to the roof. He threw himself from the roof and he died. He committed suicide. Do you realize when a person finds himself in this kind of situation, And by the way, the justice the way it is today, whether it is in Eretz Israel or in America or anywhere, there's plenty of innocent people that pay for nothing. Now, people like this, they sometimes could commit suicide. If President Katsav and Nasi Katsav, just in case he is innocent, and the whole thing was a manipulation by some women who wanted to take revenge on him, he is liable for perpetrating a terrible thing upon himself. He could commit suicide. Because on one hand he knows he's innocent, and on the other hand he's being punished in such a heavy way that one cannot tolerate. You understand? This is psychology, by the way. The same thing also with the brothers of Yosef. They stood in such a situation. What are they going to do? Yosef was somehow a little bit Rahman, compassionate. So he said, no, I believe you. Only the guy who stole will remain here as a slave. Remember, ויגש אליו יהודה, ויאמר, בי אדוני ידברנה עבדך דבר באוזני אדוני, וכו'. So Yehuda came up and he said, he spoke for his brothers. What do you mean you call us thieves? You are not Ganavim here. You know, by the way, Yosef was lucky that Yehuda did not go overboard. Because according to the Midrashim, Yehuda was enough to destroy Egypt. Mamash, with his tremendous power. And also his brothers. And that's when Yosef finally softened himself, and he revealed his identity, and he says, Ani Yosef achichem. When he finally saw that they suffered enough. You know, it says that hamisha devarim asa kenegdam hamidda keneged midda kedei lechaper alehem al ma she'asu. And there were 5 sins that they committed against him. You know, and he committed against them also. That's why he suffered also, Yosef. But at the same time, he punished his brothers because he had only one intention. God forbid that he wanted them to suffer, but he wanted them to be forgiven by heaven. And through his own, since he gave those kinds of punishment, he was sure that in heaven they will forgive the brothers. So now we see that Yosef, for the first time after many years, first he saw his brother Benhaim. His brother Benhaim was his beloved brother because he came also from the same womb, from the same mother, Rachel. So for him, definitely, he had very special feelings for Benhaim. But the Torah says something quite mysterious. That I already discussed. ויפול על צווארי בנימין אחיו ויבך ובנימין בכה על צוואריו. I'll come to Chanukah in a few minutes. But in the Torah, in Parashat HaShavua, it says that when he saw Benhaim, when they saw each other, they embraced each other, falling on the neck of each other, and cried. Benhaim cried, and Yosef cried. And you understand that the Torah is not a book of stories. Nobody is interested to know about somebody's crying. So therefore we have to understand that there is a deep message here. What was that they were crying about? I can understand that they were emotionally embracing each other. They should be happy, but crying. This is a very weak, emotional things that the Torah should bring it. Even though this could happen, but the Torah doesn't have to relate to such a thing. What was that? What was the message that was inside this, in this kind of crying? Our sages understood that. And they write in Masechet Megillah on page 16, Tet Zayin, and it's brought in Rashi, Yosef bacha al shene mikdeshot. Because I did explain a while ago that one is not allowed to cry in any case except for 2 cases. One case to cry for his dead people from his own family. He's allowed to cry. And even that with a certain limitation. The halakha says in Shulchan Aruch that one should be careful not to cry over the dead more than 3 days. Why? Hashem says you are not allowed to cry more than me over the death of someone. So even crying has to be with seichel. It's not something that should completely invade your own emotional privacy. One should be in control. The second reason why, the second case in which we allow somebody to cry is whenever it has to do with yirat het. Let's say he does teshuvah, like the Gemara tells us in Masechet Eruvin about Elazar ben Durdeya, that he was a big sinner. You know the story of Elazar ben Durdeya. The Gemara says there was not one prostitute that he did not visit. One day it caught up with him, because he was a religious man, he was a man of faith. He realized, what is he going to do? Teshuvah is not enough for him. All his life he spent in Tum'ah. One day he realized that he has exaggerated. He sat down and he cried until he died. And then a heavenly voice came out from heaven and said, Rabbi Elazar ben Durdeya muzumman lehaya olam haba. Here is a guy who was a dirty guy. And yet because his teshuvah was so sincere that it brought him to tears, understand? He became worthy of olam haba. A heavenly voice came out, and he's not only that, they even added a title. They gave him a title. They gave him Rabbi. He became a Rabbi. One of the Mefarshim asked, why did he become suddenly a Rabbi? So the Mefarshim explained that it's because he taught us what is a Rabbi, a teacher. He became a teacher of Am Yisrael how to do tshuva. A tshuva with sincerity is the kind of tshuva that reverses everything, that all your sins become zechuyot, become merits. When it is be'ahava, tshuva me'ahava. But this is the second case in which our sages allow a person to cry. If it is for your sin, yirat het, yes. But here we see that Yosef is crying and Binyamin is crying over what? Over meeting each other? Who says that you are allowed to do that? According to halakha. So the Gemara says, you have to understand why they were crying. First, Yosef baka al tzavara. Yosef was crying over the shoulders of Binyamin. And Binyamin was crying over the shoulders of Yosef. What kind of description is this? You understand that this requires some kind of elucidation, right? So our sages said in the Gemara, Yosef, he was crying over the future destruction of Bet HaMikdash, the first Bet HaMikdash and the second Bet HaMikdash, which was to be built where? On Har Moriah, which is in that portion which was allotted as the portion of Binyamin. So Yosef was crying over Binyamin. It means over the two Bet HaMikdash that were going to be destroyed, which were in that lot, in the portion of that was given to Binyamin. And Binyamin was also crying, all of them, of course, both of them with Ruach HaKodesh, with the Spirit of God. Binyamin was crying over Mishkan Shiloh, the temple of Shiloh, which was, in Shevet Yehoshua, in the time from Yehoshua, who came from Shevet Ephraim, and Shevet Ephraim is Yosef. So Binyamin was crying over Yosef because of Mishkan Shiloh that was in the portion of Ephraim that was to be destroyed also. And that's the reason why they were crying. So now the question is, why each one? Moshe, you know what is the question here? How come Yosef is crying over Binyamin? Yosef, you have enough to cry on you. Your own Mishkan Shiloh is yours, right? Cry upon it. Why do you cry over the Bet Mikdash of Binyamin? Same thing also Binyamin. Why do you cry over Yosef? Cry over your own Shnei Bet Mikdash. But this comes to teach us the most marvelous message. You see, Bet HaMikdash was destroyed because of Sinat Hinnam. Why is it that we lost the first two Bet HaMikdash? Our sages said it's primarily because of hatred, jealousy, Ga'ava over another, thinking that you are better than others. Sinat Hinam, vain hatred. 2 Bet Mikdash were destroyed because of this. This definitely requires a tikkun. And we are told that there is going to be a Bet Mikdash in the future, no? Right? But as long as we did not remedy to the sickness of people having jealousy, and as long as we do not overcome the hatred, the vain hatred that we have, how can we expect the Mashiach to come and to build Bet HaMikdash? Mashiach will not come unless if we display. Rather than displaying Sinat Hinam, we should display Ahavat Hinam. When you love each other for no reason. You don't have to have an interest in order to love someone. That's the Ahavat Tluya Badavar. Remember what was said in the parasha about Rivka? What does it say? Vayohav Yitzchak et Esav. Hitzayid befiv. Yitzchak loved Esav. But what kind of love? Because he used to bring him some food every day. Right? So that means the love of Yitzchak was only hanging on a reason, was depending on a reason. That's not good love. But Rivka ohevet et Yaakov. And the Torah says, Rivka loved Yaakov without telling me a reason. That's ahava she'ena teluya badavar. That's the kind of ahava, of love, that is not depending on some other kind of interest. You understand? That's the kind of ahava. That's the kind of ahava that brings unity. That's why we say ahava is ahava, which means love, is the numerical value of 13. Ahava, Aleph, He, Bet, He. And 13 is half the name of Hashem. But 13 and 13 is 26, which is the name Havaya. But at the same time it means Echad. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. You make Hashem one with the love that you have for each other. You understand? And Echad, the numerical value of Echad is 13, Aleph, Het, and Dalet. So that's the kind of Ahavat Hinam that Hashem is expecting from us, so that the third Bet HaMikdash will be rebuilt. Because if the first 2 Bet HaMikdash were destroyed because of hatred, then the only way to build the third, the future Bet HaMikdash, is only upon love that is Hinam, that is without any interest. That's the reason, that's what we learn from this behavior between Yosef and Benhaim. Yosef did not cry only on him. He cried over his brother. And his brother cried over Yosef's Bet HaMikdash. This teaches us that one should be concerned about the plight of others. Rather than taking care of yourself, first take care of others. You know, that's what it says. I'm reminded of a certain chidush in Parashat Kadesh Li Kol Bechor, in the case of the matzot that we have to eat the night of Pesach. So if you check in the Tefillin, in Kadesh Li Kol Bechor, you will find that there are twice the word matzot. The first matzot comes without vav, and the second matzot comes with vav. Matzot ye'achel, and then what does it say? Let me see immediately. Kadesh Li Kol Bechor. matzot יאכל את 7 הימים ולא יראה לך חמץ ולא יראה לך שעור בחוץ ולך הגעת מנחה ביום ההוא לאמור. Wait a minute, where is the second matzot? Here it is, let me tell you. Here it is. Right now you'll get it immediately. Alright, here it is. matzot. שבעת ימים, here it is. Here is the pasuk. שבעת ימים תאכל מצות. Check in the Sefer Torah, you will find that the word matzot comes without vav. matzat. וביום השביעי חג למוני. The next pasuk is matzot יאכל את 7 הימים. This matzot comes with vav. The Vilna Gaon explains why is it that the first one without and the second one with, which means the first one is lacking, the second one is full. Why? Because the first one we say שבעת ימים תאכל matzot. When it is you eating the matzot, don't pamper yourself too much. You eat less. לעולם יהיו עניים בני ביתך, which means if it is at the expense of somebody else. When you give to yourself, don't give everything. Matzot, which means only without vav, means lacking something. Something is missing. But when it says matzot ye achel, when you give the matzot to the aniyim and to the guests, give them full, give them a lot, shefa. That's why matzot is in the second time is brought with vav, to telling, giving complete service when you give it to somebody else. So that's the whole point. That's ahavat hinam. Ahavat hinam is that as you, at least you want to take care of yourself, take care first of the other people, which means be concerned about the plight of others more than you are concerned about your own plight. That's exactly what we are being taught by Binyamin and Yosef. Yosef cried over Binyamin's plight, and Binyamin cried over Yosef's plight. That's something to be worthy of notice. Let me conclude now with the thought of Chanukah. We already discussed the case of Chanukah. We already mentioned the fact that the oil, the miracle of the oil was not necessary. And it is a very big question, because Hashem would never make a miracle unless if it is extremely necessary. You know, if he did not do the miracle of Kriyat Yam Suf, the splitting of the sea, it would be impossible to save the Jewish people because they were surrounded. Therefore, a miracle had to happen. In the case of Chanukah, it didn't have to happen. Because our sages said, well, okay, they went into the temple and they wanted to inaugurate Avodat HaKorbanot by lighting the menorah. So they wanted the pure oil. And the miracle happened that the pure oil that they had was only one drop that was not even sufficient for one night. So therefore, Hashem made a miracle that it lasted for 8 days. Why? I mean, according to the halakha, Tum'ahu Trabat Tzibur, you know, all of them were teme'im, were impure because of the war. You know, the dead and everything. Tum'at Met was all over. And therefore, for two reasons, there is no reason for the miracle. Number one, the miracle is not going to help. Okay, you have a pure oil, but by touching it, since they are teme'im, since they are impure, they are going to contaminate it again. So what did we gain? Number two is that there is no need for that, because there is a rule that says that when everybody is impure, when everybody is tameh, mutar batzibur, tum'ahu tra batzibur, it's okay. They were allowed to use impure oil, and they were allowed to light it in such a state. So there is no reason for that miracle. Huh? You understand that? So why is it that HaKadosh Baruch Hu did such a special thing to make a miracle that is not necessary? Well, our sages said that the miracle of the oil, although it was not necessary, but it was an expression of love that was mamash on both sides. On one side, the Jewish people, they did teshuvah gedolah, when Hashem gave them victory over the greatest empire on earth, while having only a few soldiers, untrained soldiers. They appreciated so much the miracle of the victory that they became excited, enthusiastic to start doing the Avodat HaKorbanot, to start doing the work of Bet HaMikdash, but the best way, with Hiddur, which means the most beautiful way. They could not, and they did not want to use impure oil. They wanted to start, because they wanted to express their love to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in such a way that the only way to exhibit it is by trying to find mitzvah behiddur, hiddur mitzvah, the beauty of a mitzvah. When Hashem realized, when Hashem saw that they are so much in love with Him by wanting to even light something that they didn't have, so Hashem says, you love me, I love you. And because I love you, I'm going to create a miracle, even though it's not necessary. But this is what you want. You want to do it to show me your love by doing behiddur mitzvah. I'm going to give you the possibility to do it behiddur mitzvah. Automatically, we have answered two questions here. Number one, even though it was not necessary, since it was an expression of love of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because of the love of Israel to Him, that's why He did the miracle. The second question was, why, in which way is it going to help? Anyway, they were all impure, and by touching the oil, they are going to contaminate the oil also. So what's the point? The point is that this was not normal oil. This was oil shel nes. זה היה שמן של נס. It was a miraculous oil. A miraculous oil will not be contaminated if you touch him, even if you are tameh. Because it can. That's a חידוש that the מפרשים say. That's the point. אי אפשר לטמא את השמן הזה, זה שמן של נס. אמנם יש שאלות על זה, אז אם כן איך יצאו ידי חובה וכי אפשר לצאת ידי חובה בשמן של נס. But at least what we're trying here to say is the love that they show. Like I said once, that before Kriyat Shema we say Baruch Ata Hashem Ohev et Ammo Israel, that Hashem loves the people of Israel. Because of that, immediately after we are reading Shema, the first commandment, Ve'ahavta et Hashem Elokecha, which means since He loves us, we definitely can return the love, and vice versa. Since we love Him, that's why He also loves us. So now we see here another interpretation of love, that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu sees sincere love between each other in Ahavat Hinam, automatically He loves us also to such a point that He will be able to rebuild again Bet HaMikdash, which will never be destroyed this time, and by bringing also the Mashiach Tzidkenu B'mera B'Yameinu. Amen. Chag Sameach.